Hi mate, how are you?
Not bad, mate. Not bad at all. Yourself?
No, I'm alright, thank you. I'm alright. I'm feeling good. Although I did just want to say something before we started this podcast.
Fire away.
And obviously people do know that we both live in Reading. And I just wanted to say on behalf of us both that our thoughts go out to all of those affected by the horrific attack in the town centre over the previous weekend. And as I say, your thoughts are with us both at this time. So anyway, I just wanted to do that before we kind of got into this episode and whatever. And so what have you been up to in the past week or so, mate?
Not really much. Just sort of remained chilling, really. I had a quite fun. One of my housemates found a writing workshop thing.
Yeah.
I took part in that, and there's a play that I'm trying to write at the moment, which have been quite stuck on for a while.
Yeah.
Just sort of, it's one of those ones where I've got the ideas and everything, but there's no outward motivation to get going. And this workshop sort of helped kick me into gear on that, so that was nice. I've added a decent chunk into that, which has been the most sort of big sort of motivating and interesting.
Oh, good.
This week.
Yeah.
But other than that, just sort of doing what I usually do.
I saw a dinner workshop the old Vic put together. I mean, it was more for like A-level and GCSE kind of level students, but they did an introduction to directing workshop that I kind of did a few weeks ago, which was quite good because I think that a lot of these theatres and whatever are now doing more educational packs and stuff. And as I say, it's a good start, I think, that people can get out there and do some extra skills or learn some new things, which I think is great. There's nothing else we've been able to do. Although, as we record today on the 23rd of June, we do know that hopefully in a couple of weeks' time, if things are to go to plan as Boris has outlined today, then things might be getting back to a little bit more normal. But we'll come on to discuss that later. Anyway,
I'll try and find the title of the sort of the name of the program. It's run by the BBC, but I don't think it's a BBC thing. I think it's run by other people. But I'll find the title of my housemate and I'll get her to send me the links and stuff. I can put in the description.
We can. You're learning. Third podcast, and he's now thinking about links in the description. He knows what he's doing now. Lovely. Anyway, well, a start.
Getting there.
Anyway, with that, we will introduce the podcast. Hello, and welcome back to the Talking Theatre podcast with me, Luke.
And me, Tom.
And welcome to episode 3 of this new podcast. Hopefully you've been enjoying, should I say, some of the previous episodes that we've done now. And if not, if you haven't seen those or listened to them, then they'll be at the end of this video in the end screen. So today we're going to have a little bit of a recap on some of the things we've been talking about in the past 2 episodes. And then we're going to start talking about a production that we have both seen over the past week. So, Tom, have you been looking at some of the things that's been happening in and around the theatre world in the past weeks or couple of weeks since we started this podcast?
Yeah, I have. It's sort of a weird one. The vibe that I've been feeling about the theatre world at the moment, when I had a very positive attitude in our first episode of pilot, it was sort of hopeful.
Yeah.
Things would go right, things would go well. The hope is still very much there from the consensus.
Yeah.
But I think people are now the fear is kicking in a little bit more, and the reality is, there's a nice quote that you showed me that I can't remember exactly how it went, but it's something along the lines of the theatre industry being lost accidentally is a very sad thing, but also very real. And I don't know, there's a lot of stuff going on about people standing up and saying, look, this needs to be funded, this needs to be this and that. And while everyone in power sort of seems like they're listening, I'm starting to be a bit sceptical on how much they are.
No.
But I think on the whole, I'm still holding on to the hope.
Yeah.
That things, and whether, even if things do, dare I say, crumble a little bit, it'd be really good to. I still stand by my belief that a new wave of arts will come out of this that will be fantastic. I really do hope that.
Yeah.
I really do. It's just quite scary at the moment.
Well, I've got a bit of an update for you, actually. Something that might give you a little bit more of a ray of hope, should we say. So, obviously, on the 3rd of June, 2020, it was announced that by the Society of London Theatres that the West End theatres will remain closed until up to and including the 2nd of August. Now, we've got an update after that, and I don't know if you knew that an open letter had been sent to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Prime Minister and the Culture Secretary, and this was sent by around 100 actors, writers, directors and creatives that had all been nominated for Olivier Awards in April.
Big names. We could only dream to be part of that list.
Yeah, definitely. And the kind of tag from the report itself was, Britain's world-leading performing arts sector has been brought to its knees and faces ruin without urgent government investments. A powerful alliance of nearly 100 actors, writers, directors and creatives has won. So, I'm just going to read you some of the interesting bits that I think from the letter are and some of the demands of what that letter has asked for. So some of the bits that I picked out were as follows. So research by the UK Theatre / Society of London Theatre suggests 70% of theatres will run out of money by the end of 2020. For many...
70%?
Pardon?
70%, you say?
That's what it says here. For many, it will be sooner. 4 theatres have already gone into administration, and we are concerned that that number will rise dramatically. The existential threat to theatre is also one which endangers the important work that is already being done to create and attract more diverse workforces and audiences. Without government investment, theatres will be forced to close and may never return. The threat of British theatre being destroyed by accident is as real as it is bleak. It would not only be a spiritual tragedy, but also an economic one. And they outlined 4 demands within this letter, and they are also as follows. So number 1, to sustain the workforce through the continuation and development of the job retention scheme, and a new package to support the army of freelancers and self-employed artists who create so much of our work. Number 2 was to support theatre recovery through adaptations to the existing theatre performance tax relief scheme, support for businesses that supply theatres, and aid with making venues COVID secure. 3 was to safeguard the future of the theatre industry through an emergency relief fund and the creation of a new cultural investment participation scheme from the government in a national pledge for culture. And they were I thought there were 4, but for some reason I've only got 3 down there. So I just wondered what your kind of thoughts were on that, to be fair.
It sounds to me like people are just going... sort of the PM and the people who need to make the change, just going, listen, please, just listen and understand. Because you also showed me some stats about the...
Yes, I've got them here.
Amount of well, yeah, you would have them there. I haven't got the pages up, and I probably should do. That'll be next week's lesson. Next
week's lesson. We're learning slowly.
It's the stats of how much money are coming in, the revenue of this, and also not just that as well. Because I imagine the revenue for that is mainly ticket sales and merchandise and stuff like that. But when it comes to the West End as it is, granted, I'm talking about West End in more of the grand scale of it. So the theatres, the beautifully architected theatres and stuff like that, and the big classic shows, stuff like Les Mis, the big ones.
Yeah.
The amount of tourism that must bring into London as well.
And someone made the point the other day, actually, and I'll put the link to the video down below. I don't know if you saw it, Tom, but they had them on Good Morning Britain, and there's a really great point that was made, and an actor said, it's not just us that's out of work as actors, especially because she was a West End performer and was got something that she was in cancelled. She basically said, it's hotels around there, it's food, it's drink, the amount of people that take the train in and out of London to go and see these things. She said, think of all these sectors that apparently aren't important in terms of, like, when people say, oh, well, we've got to fund all these other things. And yes, we have. But she said, think of what the theatre also helps fund off the back of someone simply going to the theatre.
Yeah, because you don't just go to the theatre for the theatre. A lot of time, even when we've gone as students, let's say, granted we were in from a decent sort of position to go in, but you would go in and we would always, afterwards, go for a drink.
Yeah.
Probably just one, granted, because it is stupid pricing.
London prices.
Just one. And we'd always discuss the theatre that we just saw.
Yeah.
And just even if students are doing that, I'm not saying sort of just every student, but some students are doing that. It goes to show how important the culture is around the theatre.
Of course.
I mean, just going off the bat of that as well, the amount of things that, like you say, hotels, restaurants, bars, trains as well. The pricing as well is so high over there that the revenue coming from it must be massive.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have we gone and seen something where the ticket price might have been the cheapest part of going to see it? Because, we kind of would go as part of our modules maybe to see two things a term or whatever. But even if you got a ticket for £15, the train was from Reading to London would be £16, £17. By the time you've had a drink, you might have had a bite to eat or bought a programme. It's like £50 a time, so you don't really think. You just think, oh, it's £50. But you don't think how many other people are actually profiting from you simply going to watch a performance for an hour and a half.
It's lots of little taps.
Yeah, exactly.
Build up.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is when they talk of the sort of income, the national income from theatres and so on, they don't take all this into account. So when they sort of mention this, they will it becomes, in the grand scheme of things, probably a lot lower than a lot of other sort of areas of income in the country. But it's always worth looking into. And ultimately, one thing that I was discussing with my housemates as well, I can't remember if we actually discussed this podcast in the previous episode, but I think it's Sam Mendes kicked up a bit of a fuss, and he's been saying, rightful fuss. I'm not disclaiming it. He's saying that if the theatre industry dies, so does the film, because the amount of people that see theatre as, I hate the way it's phrased in a lot of things, but almost a training ground for the film industry. It's a base where a lot of people really hone their craft, and if you take that away, it's like taking out a section of training for another career choice. So if someone often goes from sort of training to theatre to film, they tend to be the ones that sort of are the pinnacle. I'm not discrediting just film actors and stuff who just do that, but it's a big base.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I've got some of the statistics here. So the official, the Society of London Theatre put within the article that I found on The Guardian that named Theatres Under Threat. Now, in 2018, so these are the 2018 statistics, 34 million tickets were sold in the UK, and that was equivalent to 1.3 billion in box office income. And within social distancing, they reckon that'll be an estimated average reduction in seats of about 80%, and they need at least 50% of a minimum proportion of tickets to even break even. And you've got 70% of theatres warning they'll run out of cash by the end of the year, and 70% of the 290,000 theatre jobs are at risk. And overall, as you were just talking about with the theatre and film and TV, the creative industries in this country in 2018 contributed to £111.7 billion.
Damn, that's a lot. And what I find fascinating about that is you don't tend to hear about that at all.
Oh no, of course you don't.
Just moving on purely because of time.
Yeah, definitely.
One thing that I sort of came out today, the day we're recording this, is Mr. Boris Johnson himself has stated that while theatres can't open, they technically can open, but just for not live performances, so pre-recorded things or live streaming and so on. And I think that's a nice, interesting tie-in to the production that we have seen this week of Small Island by the National Theatre.
Yeah, definitely.
I was a bit sceptical coming into this one, but I'd like to say I'm pleasantly surprised. I studied Small Island for my A-level coursework, and I wrote about it, and I compared it, I believe it was to Aaron Datty Roy's God of Small Things.
Okay.
And Seamus Heaney as well, I think.
Just for the listeners,
long time ago now.
Audience at home, that would be the novel of Small Island.
Yes, the novel. Yes, sorry, not the adaptation of the play, the actual novel by Andrea Levy.
Yeah.
So it was. I remember studying that, and obviously, when you're at school and you're studying books, sometimes they really stand out. But this one is sort of blended in. I didn't engage in it in a way I wanted to. I enjoyed the story, but the way it was written, it was not something. But this production of it, I really engaged with.
Yeah.
I thought the set was a bit wishy-washy at times.
What do you mean by wishy-washy?
I mean, quite literally wishy-washy. The projections and things I thought I felt were a bit strange.
Really? So I liked all that.
I appreciate what they were going for, but I felt they were a bit strange. Especially the bit that stands out to me is when Gilbert gets on the Windrush to come over to England.
At the end of the first bit.
The ladder.
Yeah.
End of Act 1, yeah. And he's going up the ladder, and it's a very clever way around it. Obviously, you can't have it. It's not like kind of a massive boat coming in to the back of the stage. But I don't know. I just it didn't look as polished as some of the other things, because the set changes were great, but some areas of the projection felt a bit. I don't know. I'm being picky here. I'm being very picky.
I personally thought I really, really liked that. I thought it was a very clever way of integrating quite a minimal kind of stripped back set, but with a more because what I thought was important about that production is the historical and archival footage surrounding the Windrush generation. I thought that lovely way of just sometimes I think within the theatre all we need is a picture. We don't necessarily need any words. And I thought that, especially at the end of Act 1, I really liked that. Just having her on the middle of the stage, looking out towards the audience with this lovely projection behind it. Because it told 1,000 stories, I thought. But I think that's probably where we differ in our theatrical tastes, maybe.
Now you've said about the importance of the archival photographs, because there's a lot of that sort of thing.
Yeah, there was.
I actually do... I think what I went off was my gut response, and I saw it and I went, looks a bit naff. And I understand now a bit more of what they were trying to do. Now you said that, clears it up, makes more sense. I still think it possibly could have been done cleaner, because it felt as if it was an afterthought in the way of the rest of the show. And let me explain what I mean by that.
Yeah, please do.
The way the rest of the show worked, the transitions, and the sort of the design for the rest of it. The way they use the projections are very much background for the most part. There are elements where it's not, but for the most part it's background and atmosphere. And that works, because I loved it when it was in sort of Queenie's house and you have the big projections of almost wallpaper.
Yeah.
It's slightly decayed and not perfect. I really like that, because that sort of gave atmosphere, and it's a really smart way to open up the space. But when you then use the same technique for something else, and it didn't look as effective to me, because I know you got to suspend your disbelief in certain elements, and the simplistic nature of the set. I don't know, especially for quite a touching moment when she's saying, like, write to me, come, make sure you don't forget about me.
Yeah. Which technically he didn't.
Words are a lot more powerful than the scene.
Yeah. Can I touch on...
I've rambled for a long time.
That's fine. I think that's good. Can I touch on something that I thought was really poignant?
Yes.
And actually, I think this kind of ties in with a little bit what we've already kind of been saying. That's something that I think's been quite a trend of the past few years. The sound, in terms of the sound design, I thought was beautiful. Especially at the end, when it was... And I don't know whether or not you got the same atmosphere if you'd been live in the audience as to actually watching it on a screen. But it was like it was taken straight from a film. It was gorgeous in the fact it the way it was done, I thought it didn't really need anything else, because you had these lovely images up towards the end of the play with this beautiful sound design, and that's something that I think is quite prominent at the moment in the theatre world. This idea of how sound can be used, similar to film, as kind of a way through the play. And a time, because we all have our own reactions to sound as audiences, and some of the most poignant moments in films, you have a lovely backing track or a sound over the top of it, which really enhances those moments and creates those emotions for the audience. And I think, realistically, it's only the past kind of few years that I've been necessarily picking up on how directors and sound designers kind of use that to create these beautiful moments in certain parts of the performance.
Yeah, I think it's something that is really becoming a lot more prominent. It's something that I've looked into as well a lot recently for my dissertation. But what I find interesting, there's a lot of things in terms of the arts and the creative side and things, which, if something is done well, you notice it less. I suppose this tends to lean more towards film, but in theatre it's slightly different. I think it's slightly harder in theatre as well. But for example, film editing or sound editing or colour grading or something like that, you notice when it's bad. Like you can spot bad CGI or bad transitioning from scene to scene on the theatre, or bad sound design from a mile away, and you're there and you're like, oh, that's pulled me right out of whatever I'm watching. But if it's done really well, it's just engrossed in such a way that you don't notice the craft of what's happening, but you notice the emotional response it gives you. And the one thing that I'd like to compare this to, which I think is fair, sort of in terms of sound design, if you compare sound design in this, that for me, I felt the emotiveness of it, and I really, at the end of it, I was really sort of really affected by it.
Yeah.
Purely because all of the creators came together in a way that I didn't notice that I'm watching theatre or so on, but it sort of worked. But if I compare that to CGI in films, the film 1917 does exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
I watched a few videos of how it was made recently, and there's so much CGI in 1917 that you just don't notice, because it's done so well and with such intent behind it to create a emotive response, as opposed to, look at this cool bit of CGI, and it's so real and done well that it blends in and gives the audience the sucker punch of emotion that they've been wanting and craving.
So although this might be a little bit off topic, do you think though, because that was always directed by Sam Mendes, do you think that theatricality and that theatrical background of Sam Mendes is what made that film incredible, or do you think it was the fact that he's just a brilliant creative in both theatre and in film?
I think that's really tough. I think it is, for sure, he's a brilliant creator in both theatre and film, because he's done excellent stuff, but I don't know, I think, especially in 1917, the fact that it's one shot film, the craft behind holding someone's attention in silences and using every technique you've got to use. I'd like to think that part of that does come from a theatrical side, because when you have that sort of technique of long silences and very limited conversation, it's all down to what you see. And I think, obviously, you couldn't have done 1917 on stage. I don't like that. If anyone tries to do that, no, I don't think it'll ever work. But some things in theatre and film lend themselves to the medium they're in.
Yeah.
And I think Sam Mendes just knows that really well.
Because I think something for me, and I know we never, just to put it out there to people, we never actually planned on talking about 1917 in this podcast, but
no, that was me going completely.
Yeah. But I think something I picked up on when I saw that was its use of colour and light in 1917, and I was like, it was one of the first things I came out saying. I was like, it was very theatrical in the sense of the way that light and colour was used, and I thought that was so brilliantly done. And now you've kind of mentioned the sound on that. It's kind of really got me questioning how important the theatre is to the film industry, in the sense of, especially with that film, Sam Mendes' background in, what was he? Artistic director of the Don Juan, 26 years old, unheard of. But that theatrical route made such a beautiful film. But yet I could personally see, as a kind of theatre student and theatre obsessive, so many things that I was like, maybe that's been taken out of the theatre world, maybe.
Yeah, there's so much that comes from, because obviously theatre came before film purely because of technology and things, but so much comes from it and the art in transferring the skills across. And I think that there is a film version of Small Island as well. I think it was a TV series for a while back. And I think that Small Island is another thing that does translate well into many art forms. And I think partly of that is because of the story that it's telling is engaging. It's got a lot of depth to it.
And it's current.
Sorry?
And it's current.
Yeah, it's so current now, yeah. And it's a fantastic bit of work. And when you have something that can work as a novel, as a TV show, as a play, it wouldn't surprise me if it was ever made into some sort of musical. It's a real testament to the art that can be transferred across. But one thing that I would like to say, which is, I don't know, it's more of a personal preference, but at the same time, it makes me slightly nervous for the future of theatre. Watching this production, I was sort of taken away by it. It's a fantastic production, but you can tell the budget in it is massive, and obviously the scale. Because what is it? 2 hours 55 minutes? Or something
it was only 3 hours, wasn't it?
It's a big play. It really reiterated in me the importance of fringe productions. Because myself, when it comes to writing, I am still starting out as a writer, so I can't imagine writing a 3 hour long play. The longest I've done, I think, was an hour and a half or something, and that took a lot. But the importance of fringe, the speed and the daring, risky nature of it, instead of a story that's already been written, it's just been adapted and so on. But this does lend into what we said in the first episode, actually, the adaptations becoming more of a prominent thing. But this whole thing of brand new theatre in a really risky way, that sort of thing, it needs to be there. And I think the sort of theatres that will get the funding from this bailout, if it ever happens, will be the big ones that will do things like that. And while that's great, it'll keep theatre alive, I don't know if it's going to trickle down. And I really hope it does. But the shorter, snappier, riskier productions, I really wish they do well as well. And I don't know why that was something that was constantly on my mind while I was watching it, but it was at the back of my head the whole day. It could be bias or selfish bias, who knows? But,
I think it's important though, and I think it's something that is important to keep considering throughout these episodes, that there is, when we think about theatre, we aren't just talking about West End theatre, Broadway, the big budgets of the National and these types of venues. There are other forms of theatre that are so important, and that's something that we really want to keep stressing throughout these episodes, really. But we're going to take a quick break, something else that I wanted to talk about on this episode, and we'll catch up with you just after this bit here. Okay, so we are back, and we want to just round off this video, or this podcast, I should say, actually, by talking a little bit about an update on the Black Lives Matter movement, which we followed and spoke about a little bit in last week's podcast, and we wanted to provide a little bit of an update on things that have been happening in the theatre world, specifically in the past week regarding that. So, Tom, I don't know if you saw this, but I think you did. So, obviously, last week we talked about the row surrounding the issues at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. Well, I've got some I've got an update on that, and it was an article that I haven't been able to read as such because it was on the stage, and I'd unfortunately used my one free article. But I've been able to do some reading in and around it, and I wrote down actually what the headline says. So I'll read it to you and just have your thoughts quickly on this one. So, according to the stage, as of June the 18th, staff at Central passed a vote of no confidence in its management, revealing they are gravely concerned about the lack of visible safeguarding action following reports of racism and abuse. That's an update on Central for you.
Good. Stuff's changing.
It's a start.
It's good.
Yeah, it is.
It's a good start. It needs to happen.
Of course it does.
The fact that it's a vote of no confidence within, you say the staff body?
Yeah, apparently so. The staff have said that they have no confidence in the management.
That's interesting.
I think that's a massive step for the staff to come out and say, we don't think that this is going to change with this management. I think that's a huge step.
It's a good step.
Yeah,
that's nice. That's a good update.
Yeah, and then kind of to finish off really, and for you guys to kind of go on after this podcast and maybe look at yourself. And I sent this to Tom this morning, actually, and I've watched all of them now. But the Push Theatre in West London put together a series of 6 kind of new works or responding to the Black Lives Matter movement over in America and here. And they've simply called them The Protest Black Lives Matter, and they are by 6 black British artists who created responses to the murder of George Floyd. And I've got a quote from the Associate Artistic Director of the Bush and creator of the protest. And they said, "The Bush kneels with the black community at home and abroad as we fight the ongoing pandemic, racism and the oppression of black people. We ask some of our Bush family to lift their voices in myriad of ways that mirrors the diversity within the black community. And this is the result. The protest Black Lives Matter." And I've left their Instagram in the description down below.
Yeah.
And one that I watched, I mean, I've seen them all, but one that really stood out to me was the one that was about 10 minutes. I don't know if you've seen this one yet, Tom, but it was really cleverly done. The text messages one, I thought that was so well thought out, because there wasn't any sound really in terms of natural sound or conversation. It was 2 people having a conversation surrounding the use of the N-word in songs and in broader society. And the way it was done was so clever, and it was so driven in getting to at the heart of what is wrong within our society. And I really wanted to take this opportunity to say that was really, really cleverly done.
All of them are very powerful.
They all are.
Well worth to watch. So click the link, have a go watch them. They're good. They're very good. Worth a watch.
Yeah. So I think that pretty much rounds off the end of today's podcast. I know we went on a bit of a tangent around 1917, which wasn't planned.
Sorry about that. That was it's a passion film. It's fantastic, and I think it's interesting because of Sam Mendes and stuff and theatre and the connections. But yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, but hopefully you guys enjoyed our little tangent, talking a little bit about film's relationship to theatre, and hopefully that might be a conversation we pick up in future episodes. Myself and Tom have got some great episodes we think already starting to be planned, and some good projects that we're involved with that we're going to hopefully bring you news of and an insight into over the next couple of weeks. And I suppose all that's left to say is subscribe to the Talking Theatre podcast, drop a like on the video if you've enjoyed this, and tell your friends about us and whatever, and hopefully we can gain a bit of traction on this podcast. And I'm personally really enjoying doing this podcast, and I'm sure it's the same for you.
It's a nice weekly break from watching the news and all that, and just discussing it.
Yeah.
Have a chat.
Yes, have a chat. Just have a sit down and have a chat, and hopefully we might soon be able to stick together and actually do it kind of in person over the next...
that feels like a weird concept.
I know, it feels crazy, but hopefully so. So, thank you for listening. I'll say goodbye, and we will see you next week.